Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are talking about Canelo's fight over the weekend, his amazing counter shots, the counter that ended up actually fracturing Billy Joe Saunders' orbital bone, completely caving in that side of his face. Incredible. It's the thing that makes Canelo most scary, in my opinion, his ability and the speed at which he counters. So I want to break down for you guys why Canelo is so effective with his counters and things you can start implementing in your own game to make your counters dangerous, just like his. Okay guys, we're talking about Billy Joe Saunders versus Canelo Alvarez over the weekend. It was one of the fights I was most excited for in a long time. And I actually thought that Saunders had a lot of the tools needed to get the job done. Now granted, he wasn't looking super sharp at the beginning of the fight, but then in round 5, 6, he started to really pick it up. He was giving Canelo some good problems, but then that counter came, and it's just something that I feel like it's worth talking about, because as you start in martial arts, you will teach or be taught to do things a very specific way. Let's say we're talking in particular about throwing this same counter shot that Canelo threw. He moved backwards very slightly, so it wasn't that way, it was just backwards. He just shifted his weight backwards and then he let his back uppercut go. Now if I was going to teach this to somebody, I was going to show them exactly how to do this technically correct. It would look something like this. It would be shift your weight back, get the head out of the way, hand is still tight to the cheek, and then as I throw, my opposite hand comes to my cheek to defend, and I'm not letting this hand that's throwing the uppercut, as I shift back, I'm not letting it drop too much because I don't want to expose my jaw for too long. But as you get more advanced, and I tell my students this all the time, you can start breaking sort of set rules that you need to learn as a beginner. And Canelo is a prime example of this. One of the reasons that he's so effective with his counter shots, which we'll talk about in a moment, is he breaks so many beginner rules. Now guys, before we go any further, the channel is continuing to explode, move onwards and upwards. I'm loving it. I'm appreciating everybody out there who's watching the content, giving the video a like, getting subscribed. If you have not already, please do so now. Let's move on with the video. Oh, and guys, before we move on, the comments. There's so many coming in. I appreciate it. I try to get back to all of them. Please be patient with me. I am doing my best to make sure I respond to everybody who's watching the videos. Okay guys, we're talking about Canelo counters, why he is so deadly. Now he does some other things exceptionally well, something that I've seen in many of his fights now, which I just love because I'm a big fan of the left body hook. He'll just be out here and he'll just step in and lead with that body shot. And you know what he's trying to do. Sure, he's trying to hurt you, but he's also trying to get people scared, get them to lower the hand so that later he can fake and come up high. He does that very well. Takes his time in the fights, creates openings by throwing fakes or scary shots at one height and then switching levels later in the fight. Amazing tactic. You just have to hit really hard down to the body to actually scare people. Now right now, if we take a look at a clip of the punch landing on Billy Joe Saunders, that right uppercut, the one that fractured or broke his orbital bone, this shot is so powerful because Canelo, after he fades backwards, after he gets his head out of the way, his hand is no longer at his cheek. He makes adjustments so quickly. Think of the time it takes to lean back and decide you're going to throw a punch. So generally when you lean back, your hand is still here, but in the middle of leaning backwards, he's leaning back, he knows he's safe, he starts dropping his arm, and then he can counter. And because his hand was back so low, he's able to generate so much force into that shot. It's kind of like working on Bob here. If I go down to, let's say, sternum level, because that's where Billy Joe's head was, if I punch at that height and my hands are here and I come straight in, I can generate a decent amount of force, but not nearly as much as if my hand starts from here and I can whip through. But again, we don't do that because it exposes the jaw for a long time and we can see the shot, or our opponent can see the shot coming so much easier. But again, Canelo can break rules because in the midst of leaning back while Billy Joe's throwing at him, he's exposed now. And then from there, Canelo can let this backhand, as he fades back the rest of the way, he can let it drop, and then his counter is ready to just throw so much power into it. Now granted, another reason why the break might have happened in the orbital bone is because Billy Joe was leaning and he actually went into the punch, which means force versus force is going to be that much more substantial. But I still want to continue to break down the specific counter that Canelo threw because I'm just shocked at how quickly he responded and how much power there was in it. So first, let's take a look at Canelo's fade back. He doesn't twist too much on this one. It's really just more from the lower back. he's just tipping his weight back. He doesn't have to go too far because it was just a hook that was probably coming to his jaw. So leaning back 2, 3, 4 inches max was enough. So as he's in his stance, he leans back. Now he does something that I've talked about before. He let his lead arm drop because at this point he knows he's safe. And I've talked about this lead arm being a counterbalance. If my hands stay up and I tip back, the arm weight is dragging back with me. But if I lean it forward, now from there it's much easier to come back because, as I just said, it sort of acts as a counterbalance. So he sees the shot coming, he starts fading backwards, his head's out of the way now. As he gets to the very end of his fade, he starts dropping his other hand. And now, from here, when he's gone back and the hand's right here, he can then unload with that maximum force. And as I said at the beginning of this video, Canelo's counters are the thing that I think is most impressive about him right now. I used to think his combos were the most impressive thing, but now I'm seeing those counters come so quickly. And the big reason I'm attributing this for is the fact that he doesn't try to make everything perfect. Let's say I'm going to throw a counter left hook. If I'm always worried about being beginner perfect, utilizing perfect beginner technique, no errors, that means I have to come right from here and I have to snap right out. But when he does a slip or something like that, he lets his hand leave his head a little bit so that when he comes in, he's able to generate so much more power than coming from here to here. Comes down, hand away, and then he can whip through with so much more force. So I guess having said everything that I wanted to so far, the big thing you guys have to realize is that it's okay to break rules. But maybe this video is not for a beginner because we don't want beginners out there going into sparring sessions and going, okay, every time I slip, I'm gonna drop my hands to get max power. Because the danger that starts happening is I slip my head, I think, oh, I'm gonna counter, and then all of a sudden I move my head into a second shot they're throwing. That's very dangerous. You have to be so good at that slipping. And in the clip, you'll notice Canelo, he fades, he hits, and then right away he's already getting ready to move out in case a counter is coming off his uppercut. The ability for him to hit and move and hit and move and hit and move, it's just really spectacular. One of the few guys in boxing since maybe Floyd Mayweather that I've seen have that ability to hit and move his head. Like every time. It's so hard after he hits you to get a shot on him. Countering him is very difficult. Anyway guys, I hope you got to watch the fight over the weekend. If you didn't, even if you know the result, it is worth going back and watching after the fact because it is just such a competitive fight. So much footwork, so much distance control. I was on the edge of my seat. Even though there were moments where Billy Joe Saunders was kind of giving away rounds, I was still on the edge of my seat because it was a very entertaining fight and a difficult one for Canelo. He didn't run away with this one by any means, and I had Billy Joe Saunders very close on my scorecard. And finally guys, just a quick summary again to make sure that if you're going to try being like Canelo on your counter shots, the big thing we're taking away from this video is it doesn't have to be hands here, slip, throw. That's the way I generally do it. It can be slip, hand down a little bit, and then counter shot, but you don't want to use that all the time in sparring. I would say this is a great one to do in noodle work. I've actually talked about these before in the video I made on Canelo, how he utilizes these so well, and I think they really help with his ability to do head movement and get his counters off. If you haven't started using noodles, don't laugh at them. Don't go, oh, they're just a kid's toy. They are very effective and worth learning to use with a partner. All right, guys, that's all for me today. If you have not already, give the video a like, get subscribed, train hard, guys. I'll see you back here soon for another video.